the number one spring storyline for Mississippi State by far is who emerges as your starting left tackle. Because, like I said, as you go throughout the offseason, you knew this was a big move thing you had to address. You thought you addressed it to an extent with the addition of Brandon Snee, but then you find out that he's not going to play for you this year. And you look and you don't have anybody stepping in that has proven themselves as a high-level left tackle to this point in their careers. And, you lose Javen James, who you can have whatever opinion about him you want. The guy probably was a replacement-level starter, but is replacement-level starter better than what you have at the moment? That's the question that has to be answered. And you're hoping as you go throughout the spring that you get a clear-cut answer to that. And what are their options? Right now, I think the leader for that would be Miles McVay coming over from North Carolina, just because that's a guy who's done it. Was not a starter at UNC, but got playing time both at left and right tackle for the Tar Heels past season, and showed some things to feel good about and feel like he could continue to develop and become a starting lineman moving forward. But, again, hasn't been in that starting role. So he's probably your leader at the moment, but is he ready to take over that full-time job? You look at a Saquon Miles, who last year was the top-rated JUCO offensive tackle in the country. You bring him in, takes a redshirt year. Not the same caliber of JUCO linemen that maybe we've seen State take in the past when JUCO recruiting was a bigger thing. We're not talking about a guy who's to the level necessarily of a Martinez Rankin, but a guy that, hey, State had to fight off, like Ole Miss up till signing day, really wanted Saquon Miles. So clearly a guy that's got ability, other SEC programs very much interested in the game for him. After a redshirt year, is he ready to step in and compete for that job? Another JUCO guy, Jakeem Shumpert-Perkins, kind of the same thing, who steps in. You think he's got the potential, but takes a redshirt year. Do you go younger? Is Tyler Miller coming out of LSU, who last year redshirted for the Tigers, battled some injuries, didn't play, but big frame on him and a high talent ceiling player? Is he ready, even not getting to develop maybe the way you would have liked to as a true freshman because he was injured? Can he step in and be that guy right away? Isaiah Dent, Oklahoma, who kind of that prototypical frame for a left tackle. You've got a lot of options, but you don't have the guys who have proven it just yet. So that is a wide open battle as we go throughout the spring. And look, to me, that's ultimately where I'm settled, is that determines State's offensive line. I think I have, and maybe I'm convincing myself, and I'm this is optimism. I talked about when we did the O-line room breakdown that I think the interior O-line could be okay when you talk about Cannon Boone, DJ Chester, and then an LJ Perdome. Maybe you kick Blake Steen inside. I think you've got solid options there. And you've got some guys that have played well in those spots. Right tackle, I think you'll get that figured out. If you play Blake Steen, you're probably fine. If you play one of the aforementioned guys, you're probably fine. You've got to have a left tackle. You've got to have a guy that can protect Camario's blind side. It's that over anything else. So who can step in and win that job? If they get left tackle figured out, I think they will be okay, at least okay enough on the offensive line for this offense to take a step forward and be good on that side of the ball in 2026. But they got to get that part figured out. Then you go to the exact opposite side and opposite of your left tackle, and you talk about, well, number two, who brings the juice at edge rusher? Pass rush has been such a big issue for State in recent years that they've not been able to get those guys that can consistently get after the quarterback. Last season, Nick Mitchell as a linebacker led you with 2.5 sacks as an inside linebacker. Will Whitson was tied for the team lead amongst defensive linemen with 2 sacks. And obviously he played 1.5 games. You had Calvin Dinkins, Malik Silla, DJ Reed. But in terms of those guys coming off the edge, Malik Silla with 2 sacks. I know he had like 7.5 tackles for loss, had a lot of quarterback hurries, but didn't get that type of production you would have liked to have seen. Didn't get that either of the past couple of seasons, really, when you talk about guys as sort of in that edge rusher role. And we can talk about defensive end versus, stand up, that Sam linebacker spot. It can go both ways, but that Sam is kind of the guy that's sort of driving this the most, and State's just not gotten the production, or, Jack linebacker in the previous defense. Do you have a guy to do that? And the guy that I'm getting excited about is Micah Nickerson as a true freshman. And I hope I'm not putting the cart before the horse here, but that was such a big recruiting win for State to get this guy who's such a late riser, hidden gem prospect, get him flipped back after he had flipped to Missouri. A guy who ends up, rivals had him as a top 50 player in the country when it was all said and done, who is just an explosive pass rusher off the edge. And all the question is, can he get his body right? He's up to 250 right now after, just spending the winter in Starkville. If he can continue to develop, he can be ready. That's a guy who's got a chance to make an impact. And I'm glad that he got to go through bowl prep. I'm glad he's going through spring. That helps a lot because he probably has the highest talent ceiling of anybody there. Then you talk about the guy who's brought in to play that role, the guy who's going to be named the starter, I would imagine, at Sam linebacker, Amari Williams from Florida State, who very athletic player, splitting time between tight end and defensive end for the Seminoles, and kind of showed a few flashes at both spots, probably flashed more as a pass rusher, which is why that's what, now that he's at the portal, he's focusing on. And a guy that Florida State fans weren't happy to see him go because they felt like, man, if we had locked him in, we think this guy could have been something, but hasn't done it yet. Now, clearly the fact that Zach Arnett was so comfortable bringing him along after coaching him at FSU, and the fact State didn't go after some of the guys that we talked about they should have, like a Harvey Dyson or a Caleb Herring, that they didn't really push hard to get those guys and try to spend up for those guys, that probably speaks highly of Amari Williams and his potential. But we got to see it. Is he going to show that this spring that that's a guy? Is Tyshawn Willis, after a redshirt year, ready to kind of play that type of role? Do you move any of the linebackers, like a Ty Lockhart, like a Darian Gillette? Do any of those guys move to that Sam linebacker spot? They need to find somebody because, look, that's the fact that you just cannot get pressure on quarterbacks. It's tough. Now, look, Will Whitson being back, even though he's going to be playing a different spot as more of a true defensive lineman, that does help because that's a guy who, what we saw, that's a guy that gets pressure. And if Whitson is getting pressure on one side, that opens up for everybody else on the line to be able to go and make an impact as well. But that Sam linebacker spot, that edge rush spot, they need a guy who can consistently get some pressure. And again, maybe you look more to defensive end, like with a guy like a Gus Cordova, and maybe that's more where it comes from. But you really need somebody to emerge at your edge rush spot. Number 3 question, we got to always talk about Camario as much as we can because why wouldn't we? Where is he at in his development process? And obviously, goes through all of last season, was there throughout the spring. We got to see him in the spring game, and he put on a show. We see the flashes throughout the season. You see the ability, the raw talent. He gets to make a couple starts late in the year, and very clearly, hey, this is the guy. How has he progressed throughout the spring and throughout the offseason? Obviously, he had to go through the rehab process. So, you had a stretch there where, because of the bowl game injury, was not getting to really work on anything other than just getting healthy. But he's full go for spring. And it's one of those things we're not going to fully know until spring practices come to an end. But, how far along has he come in terms of his comfort within the offense, his comfort with the receivers that he's going to be throwing to? The passing game's the big thing you're going to be looking to with him, where that short to intermediate pass game, where is he at? And is the accuracy refined a little bit more now that he's more comfortable in the system and you're not just throwing him out there blind in the way that you had to at times last season? That's going to be the big thing to watch with Camario. If he looks like a more complete passer after just the one-off season, that gives you all the more confidence in what this group can look like. Sven coming in with the Hail State. Hail State, haven't seen you in a while, Sven. Glad to have you here. But yeah, just his development. We know what he is as an athlete. We know the arm talent is incredible for him to launch it downfield, and we can run this offense with what he has right now. But if you can see him start to take those next steps, that's going to be really big for this team. Then number 4, kind of the questions of who's going to be catching the football from him, and that's who's the next Brennan Thompson on this team. And not to suggest that Brennan Thompson can be replaced, because a guy that runs a 4.26, they don't just grow on trees. Brennan Thompson was a special athlete, and that's why he put together the best receiving season in school history from a receiving yardage standpoint, and should have shattered the record by even more, if not for some of the misses when he was wide open downfield. But obviously somebody's got to play that role as the field stretcher in this team. Anthony Evans, obviously that's your guy that you can send him deep. he is able to win one-on-one, and you'll take those shots to him. But primarily, he is working that short to intermediate part of the field. He is your possession receiver is not the right word, but he's kind of the go-to guy. We just want to get the ball in the hand of this guy because, one, we trust he's going to be able to get open. And two, we trust he's going to get the conversion and move the chains for us, and also can make those plays after the catch. But you need that guy who's going to be the field stretcher. We need that guy who is going to be able to you're going to take those shots, dude, because you're going to take shots every single game in this offense. I think the leader in the clubhouse is Marquise Johnson coming over from Missouri, who that was kind of supposed to be his role for the Tigers over the last few seasons, and you didn't really fully get to see that materialize because of just the surrounding pieces. Maybe you look at a San Francisco McGee, who's sort of just been this highlight reel machine in spring practices, and you got the one taste of it in the bowl game. Does he take that another step forward? Is there someone else that we're not really talking about yet? Is Aiden Williams finally going to be, as a final year college football, does he break through as that type of a player? If you find that guy, though, with what you have in Anthony Evans, and again, I think it's a deep room. Maybe we're talking about a freshman, right? It could be an opportunity as well. But do you have that guy that is a consistent field stretcher? That's what you got to be able to find. Sven letting us know we need is 2 good lines before we think about wide receivers. Sven, you got in late. We talked about the line. We talked about the questions at left tackle. We talked about questions at edge rusher before we talked about receivers. So we did think about those things before we talked about wide receivers, for what it's worth. Those were questions 1 and 2 for the spring. And I don't see any way this O-line can protect Mario. Look, again, it's a big question. If they get left tackle figured out, though, I feel okay. I don't think it's going to be a great group, but if they get left tackle figured out, I can see it. But it's number one question for sure. You got to get that figured out more than anything else, and then find an edge rusher. But we did talk about those things. Last big question for the spring, number 5, and I alluded to this earlier. Who is cornerback 2? We know what you got in Kelly Jones. You got a future first-round pick. You got one of the best cornerbacks in the country who's going to lock down one side of the field. Opposite of him is the question. You got a lot of good options because last year you lacked the options, but when it was all said and done, it came back to bite you. This year, you bring over a Quinton Taylor who made 5 starts or 6 starts for Iowa State this past season and performed well, and looks like a guy that, as he continues to grow, continues to develop, going to be a quality starter at least the power conference level. Can he make it happen in the SEC now? Caleb Singleton from Syracuse is a high talent ceiling type player. Jamrock Grimsley still hasn't fully put it together yet, but obviously battled injuries early in his career. The profile coming out of high school, very, very high. So now if he's fully healthy, what does that look like for him? Is Jet Jefferson the guy? We remember going into last season, the talk of camp, at least when he came to the secondary, was that Jet Jefferson was impressing. And that he, as a JUCO transfer, looked like he was going to be the guy to step in and, probably be cornerback 2. Opposite of Kelly Jones. Is that the case this year? Now that he's back fully healthy and has a year under his belt, can it be Jet Jefferson? Can it be Kyle Johnson based on a high talent profile coming out of high school after a redshirt freshman season? You've got a really talented room. And I think you feel pretty good. My favorite for this would be Quinton Taylor just because he was a starter. Right. We've seen him be a starter at the power conference level and perform well. And if that's your cornerback 2, I think you're probably in a good spot. But I'm going to be curious about that battle. Can you find the next guy to really emerge opposite of Kelly Jones? And if you get that, you get a guy who can just be a quality starter, doesn't have to be shut down. This secondary is going to be really strong. It's going to be a strong secondary. And that would help out everything else you have on the defense. So, again, those are the 5 biggest questions I have for State as we talk about the spring, the big storylines for spring practices, things we're going to be keeping tabs on over the next few weeks.